So just a bit of an intro first. So thanks everybody for joining. I'm Blair Bethwaite. I'm NeSI Solutions Manager. So I've got the dubious honor of running this webinar today. We've got a bunch of other NeSI folks on the line as well who'll be able to take some of your questions during the webinar. You can use, we prefer it if possible if you could use the shared Google Doc to do that. If you have a short question or a short question, then pop it in there. If you've got a longer question you want to discuss, then hold it till the end and we can do Q&A then. And it'll be, otherwise it's a bit hard with people jumping in the middle of the Zoom. And just also to recap that this is a presentation of support documentation, which is already covered on support.nesi. So you can also refer to that. And in particular, this is a staged rollout of this new process. So this is sort of what you're seeing at the moment is the first cut of how we're expecting to run this process and begin the process. We'll be refining it with the commentary that we get back from you today and what we learn as we go into the staged rollout. So what we're going to cover is overview of the storage that NeSI offers and the important changes that you'd be aware of already regarding how we manage data on the nobackup file system. We'll go over the timelines around that and any user action required on your side, and give you some tips for managing data stored on NeSI systems as well. And onto Q&A, of course, after that. So, NeSI Storage. So, file system is available for users of Maui Mahawika. We've got your home directories, the project directory, and no backup project directories. So both those file systems, project and no backup, each project has a directory named with the project code there. The big difference there is that the project file system is persistent and is intended for things like software related to your project. If you're installing and managing some of your own software, but we don't do that for you in all cases. Maybe input data for your jobs, and of course important results that you want to be able to keep and manage there as well. With the no backup file system, that is designed as a scratch file system, and it's our largest storage and highest performance. And one of the key design considerations around that file system and operational considerations is that we need to always keep enough capacity there to enable large workloads and large analytics jobs to be run at any time. And that's one of the motivations for us getting this expiry process in place now, is to make sure that we encourage good data management practices in that shared space. You can also see in the table some of the key attributes of those file systems around default quotas and file counts that you get in those storage areas, and also information about backup and that sort of stuff. So that's all on the support side as well. And also note that you can use there's a little script available if you're on the login nodes. You can use the nn_storage_quota to check your usage against your quota as well for your project. So where should you put your data? We've got some guidance around that. So if you're accessing the data often, then there's really two good options there. It's the no backup and project directory. The key difference here is that if you are changing the data on a frequent basis, like data that might be used actively from jobs, then we really prefer that to be on the no backup file system, so that we don't cause a large churn in terms of our backup infrastructure that's behind the persistent project file system. So we like people to be quite explicit in their movement of data between those file systems. So when you're running a job, you're doing your computing in the nobackup file system, and then when you have your final results from that workload, then they can be moved into the project file system. That's the ideal case. And of course, your home directory as well is mainly just for configuration files related to your particular environment and how you like to set things up. So the nobackup file system and the change that's coming along. So we sent an email out about this, when was it? Maybe a week or so back now. And then about this webinar today. So on the 26th of November, early in the morning thereof, we will begin the phased rollout of expiry of data from the nobackup file system. And that means files in the NeSI nobackup project code file system or directories for users. We'll go into that in more detail now. So files will be candidates for deletion if they have not been used for more than 120 days at the time that we run the expiry policy that runs through the file system and checks the file attributes. So there's sort of really two main criteria there. I know we've got 3 dot points here, but the two key criteria are that the file is in a nobackup project directory that is consuming 1 terabyte or more of disk space at the time that the policy runs, and that the file was created more than 120 days ago or not, and not accessed or had its metadata updated in the last 120 days. So basically it means that the file has to have been untouched for 4 months. So we mentioned here this policy directory. It's perhaps easier if I move over to the next slide to explain that. So the way the process will work is that we'll run a notification job at the 106-day point, essentially, and that's relative to the age of files in your file in your nobackup project directories, and then we'll run the delete process at the 120-day point. So every week on Tuesday morning that will happen, and so essentially when we begin this process, we actually start with, we won't do any deletion the first time round. We'll just be doing a notification. But then, so then on the 10th of December, for the handful of projects that get identified for the first run of the policy, those will have files older than the 120-day mark deleted. And subsequent to that policy running, there'll be another notification run that will then notify all projects with files older than somebody connected on an iPhone. Would you mind just muting your sound if possible, please? And so the notification part of things will result in a file being created in a special .policy directory under your nobackup project directories. So that file will contain a list of all the files within the nobackup project directory that will be candidates for deletion in 2 weeks' time. And during that notification run, we'll also generate email out to project teams as well, pointing you to the fact that you have candidate files in your no backup project directories. And so we can't, of course, guarantee email delivery. So it's important that people are aware of this, and it's great that we've got so many people that have joined to hear about it. And we'll be, as we work through this process, being quite careful about making sure that we actually have managed to contact people, but for an ongoing, I guess the ongoing process, that email notification should be considered a courtesy. And you should always refer to actually the contents of that .policy directory. So timelines. So we sent an email on the 7th mentioning that this was going to be happening. On the 26th of this month, the stage rollout begins, and so the first notifications will go out. Now, when we say stage rollout, that means that there'll only be a subset of the possible projects that could be impacted that will actually get notified on the 26th. So you may have a project that has files in the no backup project directory older than 106 days on the 26th and not receive an email and not have anything in your .policy directory. Then on the 2 weeks later, on the 10th of December, those first candidates will get deleted. And so then later in December and through into January, we'll be rolling that out wider as well. And so more projects will start getting those notifications. And so I just talked about this. So you'll be notified via email from the 26th of November. And we'll talk now about sort of what we expect of you and what you can do after that. So if you've got file data that has been identified for deletion in 2 weeks, then you've got sort of 4 main options really. You can move that data to the persistent project directory. So if it's data that needs to be kept, then that's probably the first best option. Of course, that will be subject to you having available quota in those project directories. And that's something that we do based on fit for purpose allocations. And if you need to, then I would encourage people to contact support early to talk about whether quotas need to be extended to facilitate that in certain cases. You could also move the data to storage outside of NeSI, so bring it back to your home institution, for example. And just note that ultimately that's what we expect for most projects with finalized output data. If you've got data that won't be used again on the platforms, then you should be bringing it back to your institution for long-term storage and data management. You can delete the data, of course. If you don't actually need it, then please, by all means, go ahead, delete it now, so that we get the space back and it can be used by other people. And if you are going to use it in the near term, then you can access the files and they will no longer be candidates for deletion. So we already have a list of projects that we know are in that, I guess, in that bucket, or that have other exceptions arranged based on institutional priorities. And so we're always happy to talk to people about their data storage requirements. We just would like you to send a support ticket through and we'll pick it up as soon as we can. So some tips. So if you need to compile or install software that's large, then ideally you do especially for large projects, ideally you would do your building in the no backup project directory, so that intermediate files like the extracted source code and that sort of thing that actually don't need to be kept around can be removed, but install that software into your persistent project directory rather than your home directory. Some users, I guess, probably used to using their home directory as the base storage for things like that on workstations and so forth. But on the NeSI platform, that sort of stuff should go into the project directory. And then, of course, it's also shareable with the rest of the members of your project as well. The no backup file system is our highest performance storage. So when you're setting up your jobs, your job scripts and so on, then your input files for jobs, if you say have an archive of input files that need to be extracted before you run your job, or actually at the start of your job, then it should go on to that no backup file system. And likewise for output files that get written as well. So the one key point there is that just to keep in mind that the no backup file system is by definition not backed up. So if you are writing data there that is very important to keep, for example, you've spent a lot of compute time generating it, then you should move it to the project file system, to the persistent project file system, once you think that data is relatively stable and not changing anymore, so it's no longer the subject of active compute and writes. And of course, rather than waiting for us to effect the cleanup of things for you at the 120-day mark, you can, and we would encourage you to be active about data management in your jobs as well. So if you are, say, generating a temporary directory for job output files, then you should remove that at the end of the job after you've copied the final results to the persistent project file system. And again, if you have any questions about that or are looking for example ways of setting up your job scripts to do that sort of thing, then please just reach out to support and we'll help you for your particular workflow. And so we want to make sure that we don't have any nasty surprises here for people, of course. So we want to work with you to ensure that this works for everybody. And I guess in particular, we're keen to hear about what people's thoughts are on the time frames that we're talking about here, the 120 days, the overall process, whether there's any holes or things that we haven't considered. We have, I guess, related, we have another class of storage, Nearline, that we're hoping to get more widely used soon. We're in an early access phase for that at the moment. So some people have got a window into what that looks like, but that's not a universally available at this stage. And it doesn't replace actually repatriating data to your organizations for long-term management. Anyway. So getting help, you can go to support.nesi, submit a request. You can also email us. And of course, go and jump on the documentation as well. So now we've got some time for questions. Let me switch out of presenting mode. And see where we are with questions. Okay, we want to, did anybody have a lot longer question or comment that they wanted to offer at this point?
Hi, can I just pipe in here? I would just say that I still think that 3 months is not enough for certain people, because if you are someone who's bioinformatician full time or modeler or something like that, that you need to deal with NeSI on your daily basis as a part of your job, that works. For some of us who only do some bioinformatics every once in a while, I can't be changing every single file nonstop left and right. I think 1 year would be a suitable timeline. 3 months is really not, because I think what you guys are really driving is for us to just move everything to persistent and just ask for more data storage.
Yeah, thanks, Eva. So that we already obviously owe you a follow up to your original commentary around that from when we sent the first email out, and we definitely understand that use case. I guess of course the key point of the no backup file system is for data that is under active use, and so really we need to preserve that, because otherwise we won't be able to guarantee availability of that service and then the ability to run large scale analytics workloads and so on. That file system, ideally we really need a headroom of over a petabyte at any particular point. But the key thing is about how we support those use cases where, as I totally understand, you might not be sort of partway through an analysis and have a lot of intermediate data, which is quite large, and need to be able to come back to that later on. And I think that is a case for actually for moving that data to another storage location in the interim. It's just about we need to work with you to make that easy.
And just another concern I had while you were having your presentation, a lot of our intermediate data is there to just be read off another piece of software as a, I don't know, template or library or database or whatever. In that case, does it flag up as being used, or will you guys just consider it, or no, you've just, touch and go type thing, and it will still be under the policy for the deletion? Because this is why we're keeping at no backup, because it's not that important for our final. Let's say if we're writing a manuscript, we really just need a final data, but we don't necessarily need all the intermediate ones. But if I'm coming and going with my analysis, I would like to retain all these hundreds of files that were generated painstakingly in the past year or so.
Yeah, so I think so. I think the crux of that question was, what if you're only reading or accessing the file rather than changing it, will it be subject to the policy? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah. And not just me, but like if my software that I'm using is just using it to read it, will you guys know that I'm actually still using it?
Yeah. So the answer there is no, it won't be a candidate in that case. So the file system tracks all different accesses to data, including just reading the file contents, or even just updating the metadata of the file, not the contents. And so all of those actions will cause us to consider that data as being active. And that includes the software that you might be running in your jobs, or software that or the standard Unix utilities that you might be using to interact with that data directly, interactively.
All right, thanks.
Anyone else? We're almost at the half-hour mark, so we might have time for one or two more questions.
Hi, this is Johnny Williams. Can you hear me?
Hey, Johnny. Yes, how you going?
So I put the question on the Google Doc about that Nearline is not released, but deletion will start in December. Now, there's quite a few climate modelers who will have data on no backup, which will be significantly larger than 1 terabyte, and so can't just be moved into project.
Mm-hmm.
So could you let us know what the solution to that will be? Because potentially we're going to have an issue where if Nearline's not available, but we've got a lot of data that can't fit in project, then where do we put it?
Yeah. So I guess I'd point out that NeWa, as one of the NeSI collaborators and one of the biggest investors into the platform, has a large proportion of entitlement to storage on the platform, and of course NeWa there's a number of these data sets that NeWa considers to be strategically important, and indeed might not necessarily have anywhere else to put them. So we do have an exception process there, and I'm fairly sure we've got all of those things covered already with exceptions, and there are exceptions that will expire at the point that those data sets are able to be moved on to Nearline.
So those exceptions, do they have to be specifically applied for?
Yes. Yes. And so if you might have had conversations with people about particular projects already, but I'd encourage you to actually send us a support ticket so that we've got a direct record of that in the support system as well, and can make sure that we've got it on the list.
Okay, thank you.
All right, maybe one more if anybody's keen. And of course, so we've got all of these questions on record now, and I guess we'll be able to leave this document available and go through and update it with answers. I don't know, actually somebody else who's run one of these webinars in the past can perhaps give me a heads up on what our usual plan is for addressing questions that have come up during the webinar. Maybe Jenna.
Yeah, no problem. So following this session, we have been recording the presentation, and so we will be posting this to our website and emailing a link to the video to everyone who RSVP'd. We'll also email out a copy of the slides so that you have that as well, and within the slides there's pointers to the documentation on support too. We'll clean up this Q&A document just to ensure all the answers are as detailed as we can make them, and then send out a link to that as well. So we'll leave this document open, as Blair mentioned. Please feel free to type in any additional user questions even later today, and we'll include those answers and then use this as an FAQ that we can potentially post to the support site as well.
Excellent, thank you. That sounds very sensible. Okay, well, we'll wrap up there then. Thanks everybody for joining, and we look forward to your further input on this as we go along. Peace. Have a good afternoon.